first study that we have for today is a study examining how role conflict impacts job satisfaction among nurses. This study was taken in Pakistan and measured how role conflict impacts job satisfaction for degree holding nurses, how workload impacts job satisfaction for degree holding nurses, and then whether perceived organizational support moderates the relationships between role conflict and job satisfaction and workload and job satisfaction. And they specifically focused on degree holding nurses because they noted that at least a disparity there, that while degree holding nurses are highly educated and well paid, they may receive less organizational recognition compared to other roles. And their kind of theory is that may lead to less job satisfaction. And so their methods of the study were there were about 300 degree holding nurses that filled out a Likert style questionnaire measuring role conflict, workplace instability, workload, job satisfaction, and perceived organizational support. All participants were female between the ages of 25 to 50 with a bachelor's degree, which had 245 participants, or a master's degree, which had 29 participants. And the results of this were that role conflict and workload were found to negatively impact nurses' job satisfaction. And they found that perceived organizational support moderates the negative impact of role conflict on job satisfaction. However, this role of perceived organizational support did not moderate the role between workload and job satisfaction. And so some of the kind of a key takeaway from this is that considering that role conflict is defined by a lack of clarity around one's role, which leads to conflict with others, kind of this study suggests that organizational support can bolster an employer's understanding that they are doing their job well, or that they're doing the right thing, that they have an understanding of their role and are doing it well. And this points to the reality that recognition and rewards, which I think is their kind of understanding or their definition of perceived organizational support, can be helpful for handling workplace conflict.
Yeah, very straightforward. I mean, yeah, makes sense. That I think that it supports kind of some of the philosophical approaches that we take, which is, a little bit of a top-down approach, meaning that leadership has to take ownership and take some of the charge of organizational change. Because if there doesn't feel like there's support from the organization itself, it's kind of hard to positively impact the results of conflict. But in this case, when conflict and workload, we say so when conflict is when someone in conflict feels that they're getting supported by the organization, it actually helps increase job satisfaction. But it doesn't do so when it's just a high workload. It doesn't really help to do so.
Right. They kind of focused on, I feel like one of the key terms when they were talking about the literature on workload was looking at mental exhaustion among nurses. And it came to mind for me, like the idea, like if you have an organization recognizing you and saying you're doing a great job while you're mentally exhausted, you're not doing the workload. It's like, well, thanks, but not sure how much I could use a little bit of a break here instead of recognition,
Yeah. So the way that they operationalized organizational support was through recognition.
Yeah, it seems like the focus was on recognition and rewards.
Which I can see that being helpful if the recognition was about the things that they're doing well in their role. So if role conflict was the problem, then recognizing the areas, I think that's also reassuring and reaffirming of what their role is supposed to do. So I can see that making sense.
Yeah, so maybe it's a matter of the type of organizational support is important for different types of conflict or different types of problems. Maybe a different type of organizational support would be more helpful in a workload sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I'm glad that you pointed that out. As though, if someone is feeling mentally exhausted in the workplace or physically exhausted, whatever it is, recognition and validation and is not necessarily going to alleviate those concerns, right? So there has to be a different strategy for the organization.
Yep, different approach, definitely.
What is the need? How about just asking what the need is, right?
Right.